pinned the island nation's sovereignty, saying the Hong Kong model would not work for Taiwan, as democracy and authoritarianism cannot coexist in the same country. China claims Taiwan as its territory and wants to bring it under Beijing's control, even if it requires the use of force. The anti-infiltration bill passed by Taiwanese parliament recently has further sent the relations between the two to a new low. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Professor Shrikant Kondapalli from the Center for East Asian Studies in JNU. We also have with us Mr. Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation, and Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, former investor. Let me begin with you, Mr. Sajjanhar. Let's try and understand the present situation and the context it has, because all of us know that Taiwan is also set to go for a presidential poll in the next week.
Yes, absolutely. The presidential and the assembly elections, both of them, take place on January 11th. So that's just 9 days from now. And so, of course, this is electioneering is at its height as far as Taiwan is concerned. It's a democracy. It's a big democracy, 23 plus million people. So, of course, and the position of this party, of the Democratic Progressive Party of President Tsai Ing-wen, has basically been that it wants to maintain its sovereign status as a democracy. And initially, in 2016, it was the first time that this party had also won the assembly, the parliamentary elections, for the first time since elections started taking place in the early 1990s. And this is the position that she has been maintaining, to maintain a distance from China. Okay. While the position of the other parties, that is the KMT, the Kuomintang Party or the Nationalist Party, and some other parties also, they want closer relations with China. So there is this very clear dichotomy, the difference in positions between the two sides. And of course, two aspects have played into her hands, into the hands of President Tsai Ing-wen. Number one is over the last 6-8 months, the demonstrations and the protests that have been taking place in Hong Kong, and the manner in which China has handled those protests. There has been police brutality. There has been no ending to this. Of course, China has tried to deal with it by saying that one country, two systems, one nation, two systems is working in, for instance, in Macau. Okay. Because at the end of December, that was the 20th anniversary of the accession, Special Administrative Region of Macau, accession to China. And President Xi Jinping had gone to Macau and he said how this is flourishing, how this is doing well, and that would be the way to go forward as far as Taiwan is concerned. Okay. But Taiwan has cited the case of Hong Kong, that their personal liberties, their democracies, their rule of law, freedom of speech, all of that is being curtailed under this one nation, two system dispensation. Okay. So they have completely rejected it. Okay. And they have said that they would like to maintain the present status. Now, one last comment on this would be that Tsai Ing-wen is for de jure independence, but not for de facto, not for declaring the independence of Taiwan from China. So I think there is a very subtle and a nuanced difference between these positions. She's not going out there and saying that, you know, we want independence as a free country, as a separate nation. Okay. She doesn't want to change the relationship between, you know, ambiguity between Taiwan and China, but she doesn't want to get involved. She doesn't want to get completely taken over by China.
Okay, so she's against more Chinese influence out there as well. Professor Kondapalli, let's also bring in the historical perspective to it as well. Let's try and understand, because this is not the first time that the entire world is watching this tussle between China and Taiwan, though it is becoming a little more stronger this time around. So some say it's a Hong Kong effect as well, and the elections are also around the corner. Historically, if you look at it, what is the perspective there?
Well, in 1949, the Kuomintang lost the civil war and went to Taiwan, migrated to Taiwan with over 1,000 families, very rich. Some dynasts like Jiamsung, they all migrated to Taiwan. Since then, the Chinese have adopted primarily military means to recover Taiwan, but that failed. And with the imposition of the US 7th Fleet in the Taiwan Straits. There was no reunification possible by the time. The Chinese have not attempted any military takeover of Taiwan since then, the first Taiwan Strait crisis in 1958. Later in 1994-95, there was the first time Taiwan went for elections. So the Chinese have deployed the M9, M11 missiles across northeast of Taiwan and southwest of Taiwan in order to put pressure on the electorate not to go for elections. But that boomeranged on the Chinese with the vibrant democracy taking root in Taiwan. So the tactics have changed from military means to that of political, strategic conveying.
Okay.
The Chinese have suggested what was called as Santong, the three connections: postal, telecom, and shipping, and air connections. That has resulted in nearly 3 to 4 million Chinese going to Taiwan as tourists, and also some $200 to $300 billion of trade between the two sides. This has resulted in some flowering of economic interdependence between the two. But that has also resulted in concerns in Taiwan that they are getting sucked into the China mainland.
Okay.
So the sunflower movement 4 years ago resulted in the blocking of the ECFA, Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, some kind of a free trade agreement between China and Taiwan. That has been blocked by these protesters.
Okay.
And subsequently, there was the suggestion that they need to intensify the interaction between the two sides. However, the idea of one country, two system actually was applied to Taiwan first. In 1978, this was proposed by a Peking University professor, and then Deng Xiaoping took over that concept, and then this was proposed to the Taiwanese. So they said, we will have capitalist system in Taiwan. They can run the administration, military, etc., provided they join mainland China. The Taiwanese demand has been that the People's Republic of China should drop the word P and declare themselves as Republic of China. In addition, the PRC should conduct elections, which was a 1945 idea when the communists and the Kuomintang were fighting the civil war. So that was not acceptable to the mainland Chinese, conducting democratic elections in mainland China. So that did not really take off. The one country, two system then was applied to Hong Kong during Margaret Thatcher's time, when the idea of 99-year lease of Kowloon and new territories was getting over.
Okay.
And then it was applied to Hong Kong and then Macau. The one country, two systems then got stuck with the Taiwan because there was no meeting of minds on this. The Chinese promised that the president of Taiwan will become the vice president of a unified China. But that is also not acceptable to the Taiwanese because the Taiwanese president, in a pure personal issues, gets more salary than even the president of People's Republic of China. So it is not acceptable even on that count. So in other words, and then the vice president of the PRC is not a very powerful institution in China. It is the Central Military Commission chairman. It is the general secretary of the party who are the most powerful persons. So the vice president position for them is not acceptable. So in other words, this is nowhere going, the one country, two system.
Okay, so that's the historical perspective on one country, two system. But Mr. Bansal, if you look at the present situation and also, some events which have taken place, including the one bill, the anti-immigration bill, which has been recently passed by the Taiwanese parliament. So how would you look at the entire situation?
See, let me get back to historical system first, because that's very important. Because Taiwan has gone through phases. After they left the mainland and were initially restricted to Hainan and Taiwan, then of course Hainan also went back and they were restricted. Chiang Kai-shek had 4 no's. No communication, no contact with Chinese. So it was total isolationist policy. Thereafter, of course, as Professor Shrikant said, the two system, Deng Xiaoping initiated various things. and then Taiwan started opening. The party, which was the ruling party, that is the Kuomintang, which is now in opposition, was the one which initially had that stance that we will have nothing to do with People's Republic of China, and then they started opening up because they still considered themselves as the true representatives of Republic of China. Now here there was a very big dichotomy. For a very long period of time, Taiwan's parliament was dominated by those MPs who had got elected from mainland and could not face any other election. So the Kuomintang always had a majority because those MPs belonged to it. Eventually there was a big democratic movement which actually brought genuine democracy in Taiwan, and that is how this party DPI has now come to power. Actually, they recently celebrated 25 years of the democracy and things like that. This we need to understand how the relationship between the two countries has been. Now, today, Kuomintang is seen as pro-China because under their regime, all the paraphernalia of China was there. The Republic of China had a Tibetan affair government, that Mongolian affair department, and all sorts of things. But this government, which wants to make it de facto independent, even if they don't want to go the whole hog and make it de jure because China has threatened that it will launch has actually done away with a lot of these vestiges of pre-49 era. And they have been trying to say. But what had happened was that because of various internal dimensions, this government was losing power. I had the good occasion of meeting President Tsai, and they were actually down. If you see the previous elections, etc., local bodies, the government was losing. But this Hong Kong disturbances and the government's stance actually has bolstered the approval rating of President Tsai and her party. And as a result, now China, to counter this rising graph, came up with this proposal that we will have this Hong Kong thing and all that. And now this rebuke is primarily to draw that mileage from what's happening in Hong Kong, because all said and done, an average Taiwanese citizen is not very comfortable by what's happening in Hong Kong. And what is more important is, during this period when the interaction between Taiwan and China enhanced, a large number of Chinese citizens have come into Taiwan. A lot of people have married across. In fact, there is a spouses thing. There are a large number of ladies who married Taiwanese man and they have died. There's a widows party, actually, of these widows who are Chinese and are living in Taiwan. Now, it's that important a facet where actually the Taiwan's domestic policy is getting influenced. So people are concerned, and that's how you are seeing that in last few years, the government has tried to start distancing, because already Taiwanese realize there was a time when they had a huge, economically they were far ahead of China. It's the Taiwanese investment, Taiwanese technology and Taiwanese personnel who have actually brought China at this level, where China is actually the second largest economy of the world. And I think Taiwan's contribution has been immense. And I think that realization is dawning, that this interaction is not helping Taiwan, but it's actually helped China to emerge as a stronger player. And I think that's why you are seeing this sort of stance, because this is politically also correct and also in congruence with the stated policy of the ruling party, which wants to maintain its distinct identity, quite different from China. And as I said, they have been in the forefront of democracy movement. So democracy for them is extremely important. Now, what is happening in Hong Kong is an attempt by proxy to quash the functioning democracy in Hong Kong. And I think that to them is a very good trigger on which they can garner votes and actually take a tough stance against China and influence their voters and their population. And that's what they're doing.
Okay. Ambassador Sajjanhar, then would this mean that, this kind of statement coming in from the Taiwanese president, it's not only a poll rhetoric?
No, it is not merely a poll rhetoric. Definitely not. It's also it's been her position. It's been the position of her political party for such a long time. So, of course, this helps her to put this position forward. But let me also, Vishal, if you permit, just very few comments on this historical perspective.
Yes,
when Chiang Kai-shek came from in 1949 to 1987, there was a military administration, military government as far as Taiwan is concerned. There was no democracy there. And in fact, it is when Chiang Kai-shek had come, he had oppressed the original Taiwanese residents in 1945, 1947. Those memories are still there with the Taiwanese people, and that is why this feeling amongst the original Taiwanese that is rising, that their identity is more of a Taiwanese, individual of a nationality and not of Chinese. And that Taiwanese nationality, that feeling, that sense has been growing over the last several years. If you see today as compared to what it was 10 years ago, you know, that sense of Taiwanese identity has grown much more, and people who consider themselves to be Taiwanese and Chinese simultaneously, that has come down. And those who consider themselves to be just Chinese, that has come down even further. So, you know, this is a sentiment amongst the people that they want to maintain their present system. They, of course, do not, you know, even President Tsai, she doesn't want to make any changes in the constitution. No, she doesn't want to change the name of the country as such. Meaning it's not a nation, it's not a country as such, because it doesn't have a representation in the United Nations. So, you know, it's not recognized as a nation per se. But in terms of its bilateral relations with China, it doesn't want that in any sense to get disrupted. But of course, as far as the elections are concerned, as far as the political stance is concerned, she is very much in terms of maintaining her individual identity and sovereignty of Taiwan.
Okay.
And you know, as I had mentioned earlier, it is only in 2016 that this party, the Democratic Progressive Party, for the first time ever, when the election started in 1992, 1996, for the first time ever, they have got this majority in the assembly. And President Tsai has also seen, just about a year ago, she was losing elections in major cities. Her support was just about 24%. Now it is more than 55%.
Okay.
So, you know, it is all, number one, because of Hong Kong. Number two, I'll give some credit also to Mr. Trump, because of the manner in which he has decided to take on China. I think that has given some confidence to Taiwan
and
also.
put his weight behind Taiwan as well, starting
yes.
from the day he was elected as the President of the United States.
More importantly, last 1 year, you know, since the time that the US-China trade war started.
Okay.
So then I think the message went out to the world, and particularly to Taiwan, that this is a president who is willing to take on China.
Okay, and that serves the United States' purpose as well. But Professor Konopally, does that mean that, you know, this is also people's sentiment as well as an effect of what's happening in Hong Kong, and not just because of the pending elections or a particular party's stated line which is there?
Well, the Hong Kong connection is also kind of structural, because that is an indication of how one country, two systems is working or not working on the ground reality. And Taiwan connection is also important because the movement began in March this year, last year, and it was based on the extradition bill. Incidentally, the extradition bill was triggered by the Taiwanese residents who were involved in this in a law and order kind of a situation. And so there was actually a Taiwanese connection to the extradition bill, which the Hong Kong CEO wanted to push through, and then have the mainland China legal system addressing that issue. Also, Taiwan was one of the first places to have announced kind of refuge for the Hong Kong people who wish to get out of Hong Kong, out of that situation in the last 6 months of protests. So Taiwan actually took a lot of lead in this process of democratization and articulating the demands mainly from the. So to that extent, I think there was the showcasing of democracy by Taiwan towards the Hong Kong people. That was a main inspiration as well for them. We do not know whether there was any assistance, material assistance or not, but there was the moral assistance that was given in terms of as a new democracy. Taiwan had been able to push the Hong Kong people into demanding those 5 aspects that they did on extradition bill, on amnesty, on universal suffrage, and so on and so forth. So there is actually a Taiwanese connection to the Hong Kong
and it's there, a mixture there as well, or the effect of what's happening in Hong Kong as well, and what Taiwanese people want. Mr. Bansal, it is we've seen a lot of back and forth on this particular issue, both within Taiwan and China's stand, as well as if you look at the international community also. But the place where we stand now, and with the elections around the corner also, how do you see this entire issue moving forward, moving ahead? There might be a new government or a new president in place, or she might, the present president might get re-elected as well. But irrespective of that, how do you see things moving ahead?
See, if the present government gets re-elected, and it has consistently tried to distance itself from China, and in fact, the president has actually come out with new South policy, where she has realized that Taiwanese investment into China needs to be curtailed, and Taiwan needs to start investing with new countries in South and Southeast Asia, which includes India also. In fact, India is one of our focus areas, and she wants that we should have greater interaction with Taiwan and things like that. And as of now, if you go by the approval ratings, and if this is the modus operandi which continues, it is undoubted that her party should emerge victorious. And if that happens, I think this sort of policies will continue. But please understand that today's Taiwan is quite different from Generalismo's Taiwan, when there was no communications, there was nothing, because today you have a large number of spouses. Virtually there are so many flights going from Taiwan to China and back, and the number of Chinese who are visiting Taiwan and number of people from Taiwan, they are teaching in various universities and things like, so it's a very intermingled society. So the DPP will have to walk a cautious path. Actually, if they want to disengage with China, it has to be gradual and without tipping the ante. In fact, they would have to slowly start disengaging. Probably their investment needs to curtail, because bulk of their investment is across the strait. So now if they want to disengage also, that's also an issue. Most of the Taiwanese companies are invested, and that is where I think this president has been wanting that their new engagement should be with these newer countries of Southeast Asia and South Asia, as well as Australia, New Zealand, etc., where she wants that the bulk of their investment and trade and economic interaction takes place, so that their dependence on China, because it is now fairly dependent, because bulk of their investment is there, gets curtailed.
Okay, and Mr. Sajjanar?
Yeah, basically, I think that's right. Her policy has been that the Taiwanese who had gone across the strait to invest in China, that they should start reinvesting back in Taiwan. And from 2008 till 2016, when we had a president from KMT, from Kuomintang, from the Nationalist Party, President Ma, and he is the one who had promoted better economic and commercial relations between the mainland and between Taiwan. And this was also the policy of China, that if there is so much of engagement with the mainland, then Taiwan will find it extremely difficult to wean itself away. This is what is happening, but then since President Tsai has majority in the assembly, she is putting in place economic policies so that these investments can start coming back. Because we have to remember that it was KMT which had signed the 1992 consensus between mainland China and Taiwan, which said that both the countries, there is one China. What is the real China, that they have to find out, but they will discuss, they will negotiate. But President Tsai is not agreeable on that. And that is why President Xi has been applying pressure on Taiwan since the time he has come. But of course, he has also found that it is becoming counterproductive. And the last word I would like to say is, my hunch at this moment is that the results of the Hong Kong elections at the end of November, they had gone completely against China. And I think these people who have been very much engaged with that, they have been watching it. And I think the elections that take place here on the 11th of January might also follow the same trend.
Okay, so definitely the upcoming elections will be very crucial as far as this entire issue between China and Taiwan.